Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I actually have to start this one with a bit of a confession.
Oh, boy. A confession right at the top of the hour. We haven't even introduced the material yet.
I know. And no, it is not about my coffee consumption this time. That remains a problem for another day.
Well, that is a relief. So what's going on?
So I was looking at my calendar this morning. You know the drill, right? The color-coded blocks, the reminders set for every 15 minutes, a to-do list that frankly looks more like a hostage negotiation demand list than a daily plan.
I am very familiar with your calendar, yes. It's intense.
Yeah. Well, I looked at it today and I felt good. I felt safe.
Safe. That is a very specific and kind of loaded word choice for looking at a scheduling app.
Yeah.
Usually people feel overwhelmed, but safe.
Exactly. I felt like if I just stayed inside the lines of my schedule, nothing could go wrong. Like if I just executed the plan, I was protected. And then I read the material for today's deep dive and I realized I wasn't organizing my life. I was building a fence.
A fence.
A literal defense mechanism against my own brain.
It is a striking image, isn't it? We usually think of productivity as a virtue. I mean, we live in a culture that completely worships the hustle. But the material we are covering today flips that entirely on its head.
It totally does.
It asks a really uncomfortable question for you, the listener, and for us. What are you so afraid of that you have to schedule every single moment so that silence doesn't get in?
It sent a chill down my spine, honestly. But in a good way. Like a wake up and smell the coffee kind of chill.
Yeah.
So let's get right into it. We are looking at a truly fascinating slice of history today.
We are.
This is session 321 of the Early Sessions, Book 7 of the Seth Material.
And specifically, this session was recorded on a Wednesday evening, February 22, 1967, at 9:00 p.m.
So we are transporting ourselves way back to the late 60s in Elmira, New York. And before we dive into the deep end, we need to make sure everyone knows the ground rules.
Right, the legal stuff.
Exactly. This podcast is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We aren't selling you the answers to the universe, and we certainly aren't selling you a new calendar app. We're just exploring the ideas contained in these sessions.
And our mission today is to unpack some truly unusual concepts. We are going to talk about why your rigid daily schedule might actually be blocking your intuition.
And we're going to talk about why you might be allergic to the shape of a perfume bottle. Not the perfume itself, the actual glass bottle.
Plus, we are going to get some fashion advice from a multi-dimensional entity. Because apparently sweaters are a high-stakes game.
It's going to be a wild ride.
It really is a dense session, but it is incredibly practical. It bridges the gap between deep, almost Freudian-level psychology and the mundane objects sitting in your living room right now.
It connects the dots between the furniture you sit on and the thoughts you think. So let's start with that fence I mentioned earlier, the schedule.
Let's unpack the fence.
In this session, Seth, who is speaking through Jane Roberts, who is referred to as Ruburt in the material, is analyzing why Jane is so obsessed with her work schedule. And he doesn't call it dedication.
No, he definitely does not pat her on the back for her strong work ethic. He actually calls it a disciplined schedule as a fence against the subconscious.
A fence against the subconscious. That phrase just stuck with me all morning.
It's the core of the whole argument. Seth observes that Ruburt becomes panic-stricken, imagining himself without this structure.
Panic-stricken. I mean, that is a massive reaction to just having some free time. Most people would kill for an empty Tuesday afternoon. Why the panic? What's so scary about not having a plan?
Well, to really understand that, we have to look at how Seth views the subconscious. Seth argues that the fear isn't about boredom. It's not about just having nothing to do. It is about what might bubble up if the conscious mind isn't constantly occupied.
The monster's in the basement.
Exactly. He says that in these instances, time is used to clamp down on the inner self rather than to release it.
Okay, let's pause and unpack this because I think a lot of us do this without even realizing it. We scroll on our phones, we overwork, we plan every weekend, we listen to things at double speed.
Constant input.
Right, because if we just stopped, we might actually have to hear our own thoughts. Or worse, feel our own feelings.
Precisely. It's the void we are trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Seth notes that Ruburt has been afraid to simply sit and think. The fear is that the spontaneous, the intuitive, creative, completely unscripted part of the personality might show itself without the symbolized writing mechanism.
Symbolized writing mechanism. That's Seth speak for Jane writing her books, right?
Correct. Jane felt safe letting her subconscious out if she was actively writing a book or channeling Seth, because that's a controlled environment.
It's work.
Exactly. It's work. It has a container. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. but just sitting there in a chair, letting the thoughts flow without producing a product at the end.
Terrifying. Because it is totally unpredictable. And the ego, generally speaking, loves prediction. It loves control. It loves knowing exactly what is going to happen at 3:00 p.m. on a Thursday.
The ego is essentially a prediction machine. It wants to know what happens next so it can ensure your survival. Seth points out that this rigid control prevents spontaneous enjoyment of an everyday variety.
And here is the kicker with that. That enjoyment isn't just about having fun, it is balancing. It is biologically and psychologically necessary for health.
So if you don't have spontaneous fun, you actually get sick.
Wait, you're asking me. You're the expert here. But yeah, essentially, yes, you become rigid. Your energy stagnates.
Seth actually says that this rigidity was causing Jane physical symptoms. The body was directly mirroring the mind. The fence was turning into a cage. The energy that should have been flowing naturally was getting backed up and creating tension in your muscles.
So the prescription for this schedule addiction wasn't, 10 hours of deep meditation, and it certainly wasn't work harder. It was
Going out to dinner.
going out to dinner. I love it.
It seems so mundane, doesn't it? But Seth frames a trip to a local restaurant as a major therapeutic breakthrough.
I love how Seth talks about this. He treats a basic menu and a waiter like they are tools of high magic. Like ordering the soup of the day is some mystical ritual.
In a way, within the context of consciousness, they kind of are. Seth explains that these outings provide a habit of release, but what's really fascinating is the specific mechanism he describes. He talks about the small shock.
The small shock, that sounds like something you get from touching a doorknob in winter. What does he mean by small shock here?
He says, and this is a quote, "Even the small shock you see, involved in different tastes, provides small surprises that are releasing to the sense mechanisms."
That is such a cool way to look at eating out. It's not about the calories or the social status or taking a photo for social media. It's that you are tasting something you didn't cook yourself.
Right. You're sitting in a chair you don't own. The ambient lighting is different. The smells coming from the kitchen are different.
And all that novelty forces the ego to let go of its rigid grip for just a second. The brain has to process new data. It can't run on its usual autopilot.
Seth says the ego was actually frightened by the lack of structure at first, but now it is cooperating because it enjoys the plans. It's basically a way to trick the ego into relaxing.
It's like distraction therapy for the control freak inside of us. You give the ego a shiny new object, like a menu or a new environment. And while it's busy looking at that, the subconscious can sneak out the back door and take a breath.
Exactly. Seth says these small changes are breakthroughs and therapeutic. He warns that if you don't make these small changes voluntarily, other portions of the self might actually demand them.
And usually through illness or a crisis, right?
That is the implication. Seth used illness very often as a direct message from the inner self saying, we need to stop, we need to change.
So if you won't take a vacation, your body will make you take a sick day.
Pretty much. So going out to dinner is actually a way of preventing a physical breakdown.
I'm definitely using that line tonight. Honey, we have to order appetizers. It's for my spiritual health. Sorry, I can't do the dishes. I need a small shock to my sense mechanisms.
Hey, it is completely valid according to the material. Seth says these gestures show your intent to other portions of the self. You are signaling, I am open, I am not a robot, I am willing to experience the world.
But Seth does suggest keeping the changes small, right? He warns against doing anything too drastic all at once.
Yes, that is a crucial nuance for anyone listening who wants to apply this. He suggests a variety of small, perhaps but frequent alterations. He explicitly warns that more extensive changes, like a sudden change in working hours, for example, might frighten the ego and should be avoided.
That is really wise. If you are a massive control freak and you suddenly quit your job or completely flip your daily routine upside down, your ego is going to freak out and clamp down even harder. You have to titrate the spontaneity.
Titration is the perfect word for it. Small doses. A new restaurant. A slightly different route to the grocery store. A walk by a river you've never visited. These are the small shocks that keep the fence from turning into a prison wall. It's about slowly building tolerance for the unknown.
Speaking of prison walls, or maybe straitjackets is a better word for this next part, let's talk about the sweaters. This is easily one of the strangest and most specific parts of the entire session.
It really demonstrates how granular the Seth material can get. It isn't just high-level philosophy about the cosmos. It is literally about what you wear to bed.
So the context here is that Jane, or Ruburt, was having physical symptoms, real pain and difficulty with her arms, a lot of stiffness, and Seth traces this back to
Sweaters.
sweaters.
specifically wearing sweaters to bed. Seth explains it like this. He says, at those times when Ruburt wears sweaters to bed, you see, they serve as reminders of his mother's bed jackets.
Bed jackets. That's a bit of a blast from the past. For our younger listeners out there, a bed jacket is basically like a short, cropped robe you wear while sitting up in bed reading or resting. But the connection here is purely psychological, right? It's not that the wool of the sweater was scratching her or cutting off her circulation.
No, it is entirely associative. The sweater is a symbol. By wearing it, Ruburt was unconsciously identifying with his mother. And we have to remember, Jane's relationship with her mother was incredibly complicated, to say the least.
Right. Her mother was an invalid for many years, suffering from very severe rheumatoid arthritis.
So by putting on this modern bed jacket equivalent, Jane is literally physically stepping into the costume of her invalid mother.
The sweater triggered the memory triggered the deep association of illness and restriction, and then that association manifested as actual physical difficulty with her own arms.
It's psychosomatic in the truest, most literal sense. The mind directly affecting the physical body.
It's like the body is acting out a play based on whatever costume you put on it. Oh, we're wearing the sick person jacket today? Okay, engage stiff arms mode.
That is a perfect analogy. The subconscious really doesn't differentiate well between what is real and what is symbolic sometimes. If the symbol is emotionally charged enough, the physical reaction is real. And Seth's advice for this is both hilarious and deeply practical. He essentially issues a ban on black sweaters.
I love the quote here. Let me find it. Right. Seth says, I would suggest for a while that he refrain from wearing black sweaters in general, except that I fear his wardrobe is already depleted.
And he actually adds a smile in the transcript there.
Yeah.
It is a great moment of levity. You have this vast, disembodied consciousness who usually talks about the complex nature of time and space, suddenly worried about Jane's lack of clothing options.
It's amazing. But the underlying advice is dead serious. If an everyday object triggers a negative emotional association, get rid of it. Or at the very least, stop wearing it to sleep when your psychic defenses are totally down.
Exactly. But it gets even weirder than the sweaters.
Oh, you mean the geometry of allergies? This part completely blew my mind.
You were referring to the perfume bottle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jane has this allergy or sensitivity to certain perfumes, which sounds like standard stuff, right? A lot of people get headaches from strong artificial scents, but Seth says, no, that's not what's happening.
Right. Seth says he is allergic, so to speak, to perfumes or colognes that come in a particular shaped bottle rather than to their contents.
The shape of the bottle, not the liquid inside, not the chemicals. That sounds insane. How can you be allergic to a geometric shape?
It is fascinating.
Yeah.
Seth explains the root of this sensitivity. Apparently, Jane's mother used to harshly call her greedy for wanting to use her fancy perfume when she was a little girl.
Oh, wow.
So that specific bottle shape, likely a very distinct, maybe Art Deco shape that was common at the time, is permanently linked in her brain to the memory of being scolded.
So it's not the memory of the smell of the perfume at all. It's the visual trigger of the glass.
It's the memory of being called greedy, of feeling deep childhood shame, of feeling rejected by the primary mother figure. So when adult Jane sees that shape, or even handles a similarly shaped bottle, the body goes, alert, shame incoming, rejection incoming, and it creates a literal allergic reaction to reject the object.
So the sneeze or the headache is a physical rejection of a psychological hurt from decades ago.
Exactly. And it extends to other objects, like the room heater in their apartment. Seth mentions that Ruburt strongly dislikes their room heater. Not because it doesn't work or because of the heat it puts out, but because it physically resembles his mother's space heater.
It's a haunted heater.
In a psychological sense, absolutely yes. We live in a world of symbols. Our environment is cluttered with objects that aren't just objects. They are triggers. They are frozen emotional memories.
And most of the time we have absolutely no idea. We just walk around thinking, I don't like that heater, or this perfume makes me sneeze. We don't realize we are reacting to a conversation that happened 20 or 30 years ago.
That is exactly why Seth emphasizes that the simple fact of recognizing these associations is an automatic benefit.
Just knowing is half the battle.
Yes. Once you know why you hate the heater loses its power over you. He says the sensitivities will lose and are losing their power simply through awareness.
Awareness is the solvent. That's the big takeaway for you listening. You have to really look at your environment and ask, do I actually hate this object? Or does it just remind me of a time or a person that made me feel small?
It encourages a very deep, honest audit of one's surroundings. Look at your desk, look in your closet, your car. Are there things sitting there that lower your energy simply because of where they came from or who gave them to you?
I'm looking at a coffee mug right now on my desk that was a gift from an ex, and suddenly the coffee doesn't taste as good.
Well, there you go.
Mm.
It might be time for a small shock of a brand new mug.
Definitely. So we've got schedules that fence us in, we've got sweaters that hurt our arms, and perfume bottles that judge us for being greedy. This sounds like an absolute minefield to navigate. How do we fix this? How do we dig this stuff up without having to spend 10 years on a psychoanalyst's couch?
This brings us to the tools for excavation. In this session, Seth discusses the use of the pendulum.
For those who maybe don't know, let's quickly clarify what that is. A pendulum is usually just a small weight on a string or a chain. You hold it steady, ask a yes or no question, and interpret the swing, like clockwise for yes, counterclockwise for no, that sort of thing. It's an ideomotor response tool.
Correct. The theory behind it is that your subconscious muscles make micro movements that swing the pendulum, which completely bypasses the conscious mind's analytical filter. And Joseph Robb, Jane's husband, have been using one quite a bit.
And Seth validates this practice, right?
He does. He says, you have been doing well with the pendulum, and the exercise has successively opened up communication with deeper layers of the self.
So it's a totally valid way to bypass the fence of the schedule and the conscious mind. It sneaks right under the fence.
Yes. Seth even suggests taking it a step further. He suggests Ruburt could go into a light trance state while holding the pendulum. This would add even more depth and reliability to the answers by passing the deeper fear blocks that might interfere with the muscle movements.
But, and this is a huge flashing red warning sign here, Seth gives a very stern warning about doing this work. He doesn't just say, go play with the pendulum and have fun.
He does not. And this is critical for anywhere interested in this kind of shadow work or deep psychological exploration. The warning is simply no release.
No release. It sounds ominous. What exactly does he mean by that?
It refers to the extreme danger of uncovering a trauma without expressing the emotion that is attached to it. Seth says, if extremely upsetting material is obtained, then the emotional release must be allowed before this session is considered finished.
He notes that on a few occasions, Rob and Jane had uncovered something upsetting with the pendulum, maybe a repressed memory or a really hard truth about themselves, and then they just stopped. They just ended the session.
Which is pretty much the worst thing you can do. Imagine opening a deep wound to clean it out, seeing all the infection inside, and then just slapping a Band-Aid over it without actually draining it. The whole system goes into shock. You have brought the toxicity to the surface, but you haven't expelled it.
So what is the cure? If you're doing this work, either with a pendulum or journaling or whatever, and you hit a raw nerve, what do you do? Because you can't just put the pendulum down and go watch television.
Seth calls for spontaneous talking out. You have to vent. You have to verbalize the pain. He says the goal is to elicit the full release of pent-up emotions that lay behind the uncovering.
You just have to let it flow. Cry, yell, talk it out with someone.
Precisely. Even if the emotion seems totally irrational in the present moment. Seth states, this is excellent therapy, incidentally, for the release of the emotions automatically releases the symptoms. But if you uncover the information, what happened, without releasing the emotion, the energy of what happened, you are just re-traumatizing yourself.
You're bringing the ghost into the living room and then locking the door with you inside.
That is a very vivid image, but it's accurate. It really highlights the difference between intellectual understanding and emotional processing. You can know exactly why you're messed up, but if you don't physically feel the feelings, you're still messed up.
Insight alone is not a cure.
Exactly. Release is the cure.
It's interesting because Rob asks about clairvoyance in this session, too. He wants to know if Jane's physical symptoms, her stiff arms, her anxiety, are actually blocking her psychic abilities.
And Seth's answer to that is very nuanced. He says the fear blocks the information from coming through clearly, kind of like a radio jammer, but the physical reaction still happens regardless.
Wait, explain that. That sounds a bit complicated.
Okay, so imagine the subconscious is a radar screen. It picks up a blip. It knows something is coming. Maybe it's a negative event or just an overwhelming emotional wave. The conscious mind looks at that and says, I don't want to see that. That's too scary. So it blocks the visual or verbal message from reaching your awareness. You don't, quote unquote, hear the warning.
Okay, so I'm effectively ignoring the radar screen.
Right. But your body is still wired to that radar. The body still reacts to the stimulus, even if the mind is ignoring it. So you might suddenly feel incredibly anxious, or get a physical symptom, or feel sick to your stomach without consciously knowing why, because you've blocked the message.
It's like hearing someone scream but refusing to acknowledge it. Your heart still races, your adrenaline still spikes, even if you try to tell yourself you didn't hear anything at all.
Exactly. Seth is saying that Jane was picking up on things psychically all the time, but because she was afraid of the information, she was converting that raw psychic energy into painful physical symptoms.
That is just exhausting to even think about. No wonder they needed to go out to dinner so badly.
It requires a tremendous amount of psychic energy to maintain those blocks. It is very hard work to keep that fence standing day after day.
So we have the core problem here: blocked emotions, rigid schedules, haunted objects. And we have a tool, the pendulum, which must be used with caution. But Seth offers some other surprisingly physical and simple remedies in this session, too.
He does, and they are delightfully simple. They aren't expensive or complicated therapies. One of them is just water.
Water, just water, like drinking 8 glasses a day.
Well, hydration helps, but he specifically mentions physical proximity to water. Seth states flatly, water has healing qualities, and he specifically suggests taking walks by the river.
And the session notes actually specify the Chumung River, which flows right through Elmira, New York, where Jane and Ruburt lived.
There is something fundamental about moving water.
Huh.
The flow, the negative ions in the air, the deep symbolism of constant movement, it all helps break up that psychological rigidity we talked about earlier. Rigidity is static. Water is fluid. It's the exact opposite of the fence. You can't fence in a flowing river.
It's ancient wisdom, really. Pretty much every culture on Earth has a tradition of healing waters. It's just so interesting to hear a high-level intellectual entity like Seth just plainly say, go for a walk by the river. It grounds the whole dense philosophy.
It really does. And then there's the suggestion that honestly made me laugh out loud when I read the transcript. The makeover.
The hair color. This is the best part of the whole session.
Yes. Seth seriously suggests a change of hair color for Jane. He says a change of hair color would minimize any lingering mother identification.
It connects right back to the sweaters. If Jane looks in the mirror every morning and sees her mother staring back at her, just because of strong genetic resemblance, it reinforces all those old patterns and traumas.
Exactly. Every single time she passes a mirror, she gets a subliminal reinforcement. I am a mother. My mother was sick. Therefore, I am sick. Changing the hair color breaks that visual link instantly.
It's new hair, new entity focus. It sounds so superficial at first glance, just go dye your hair, but it's actually incredibly deep identity work. You are literally painting over your avatar to say to your subconscious, I am not her, I am me.
It completely disrupts the pattern recognition of the ego. It is another version of the small shock that allows for a brand new self-image to form. It's a physical ritual of separation.
I love that so much. It totally validates everyone who has ever gone through a bad breakup and immediately dyed their hair or got impulse bangs. You're not crazy. You're just minimizing lingering identification.
It is a deeply intuitive attempt to reset your own personal narrative. And Seth is all about authorizing the self to consciously change its own narrative.
Now, speaking of narrative, Rob, being Rob, tries his hardest to steer the conversation toward past lives. He always wants the juicy, esoteric stuff. He asks about Boston and Walter Zay, who was Jane's first husband, right?
Yes. Rob is always playing the investigator. He really wants to map out all the multidimensional connections. He strongly suspects that Jane, her mother, and her ex-husband have a tangled history that goes back centuries.
And Seth just shuts it down. I mean, politely but firmly.
He does. He basically says, not yet.
But he does confirm the connections exist, though.
Yes, he says, indeed, regarding the psychic involvement with her mother's entity and Walter Zay, but he flat out refuses to get distracted by it right now.
Why? Why not go into the past lives? That's the exciting stuff. That's what sells the New Age books.
Because the current personality is in distress. Seth explains, first we must relieve the sensitivities, and then we shall work toward the construction of a more favorable past.
Whoa, stop the tape. Construction of a more favorable past. That is a phrase that bends the brain a little bit.
It is definitely the phrase that stops you in your tracks when you read it.
Notice he doesn't say discovery of a favorable past or remembering. He says construction.
This hints at one of the most mind-bending core tenets of the entire Seth Material. The idea that time is not linear at all, and that the past is not a fixed, immutable thing. Just as we actively change our future from the present moment, we can, in a very real sense, alter the past, or at least our psychological connection to it, and its continuing influence on our biology.
But he's making it clear they have to clear the now first.
Yes, you cannot rebuild the foundation of a house while the roof is currently on fire. You have to put out the fire first, The immediate physical symptoms, the acute fear, the daily rigidity. Once the current present-day personality is stable and those immediate sensitivities are cleared, then you have clear, same access to the other, deeper material.
So the lesson for us is deal with your black sweaters and your haunted perfume bottles right now before you try to figure out who you were in 1850.
Exactly. Spiritual bypass is a very real trap.
Hmm.
You cannot use past lives or esoteric philosophy to escape your mundane present problems. The point of power is always in the present. If you are rigid and fearful today, knowing you were a brave knight in the 12th century isn't going to help you pay rent or heal your stiff arms. In fact, you'll probably just interpret that past life through your current lens of fear anyway.
That is actually really grounding because it's so tempting to want to escape into the mystical when real everyday life gets hard. But Seth is basically saying, no, fix the schedule, go out to dinner, change your hair color, fix the now.
And in doing so, you automatically prepare yourself for the bigger, multidimensional work. You clear the static from the radio so the real signal can finally come through.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's look at the big picture we've uncovered here. We started with a daily schedule that acts like a fence.
And we learned that this fence is built entirely out of fear. Fear of the spontaneous, unpredictable self. And that the way to take down that fence isn't with a wrecking ball, but with small shocks. A new restaurant. A slightly different routine. A way to gently show the ego that the world doesn't end if you go off script for 10 minutes.
We also learned that our physical environment, our sweaters, our heaters, our glass bottles, can be absolute minefields of emotional triggers, and that simply recognizing them is the first big step to disarming them. We have to honestly audit our lives for these hitter symbols.
We learned that tools like the pendulum are incredibly powerful for digging this stuff up, but they require serious responsibility. You cannot just uncork the bottle of trauma and walk away to watch TV. You must allow for emotional release. You must feel it to heal it.
And we learned that sometimes the absolute most spiritual thing you can do for yourself is take a walk by the river and dye your hair.
It is a beautiful, grounded synthesis of the magical and the practical. Seth doesn't let you just float away in abstract theory. He brings you right back down to your dinner plate and your wardrobe.
He really does. Now, before we sign off, I want to remind everyone listening that if this conversation sparked something in you, if you want to know more about Seth, Ruburt, and Joseph, you really need to go directly to the source.
Absolutely. We are just scratching the surface of session 321 here. There is so much more texture and depth in the actual full transcripts. You can find all the books and the bookstore at sethcenter.com, the-early sessions. That is the new Awareness Network website. It's so important to support the publishers who keep this vital material alive and accessible.
And credit where credit is due, always. This specific material comes from the Early Sessions Book 7. It's an absolute treasure trove for anyone interested in the mechanics of consciousness and reality creation.
It really is. It's practically a user manual for being human.
So here's my final thought for you to chew on tonight. Seth mentioned constructing a more favorable past. We generally tend to think of the past as stone, right? Carved, finished, completely unchangeable. But if simply changing your hair color can break a deep psychic connection to a mother figure, and if throwing away a specifically shaped perfume bottle can stop a physical allergic reaction in its tracks, aren't we kind of rewriting our personal history every single day?
We are definitely rewriting the effect of our history. And perhaps in a larger multidimensional sense, that literally changes the history itself. We are liberating ourselves from the single timeline we thought we were permanently stuck in.
If we have the power to edit the script of our present lives, maybe we can edit the prequel too.
A fascinating possibility. Gives the old phrase, hindsight is 20/20, a whole new meaning. Maybe hindsight is actually an active, creative act.
Something to think about while you're staring at your color-coded calendar tomorrow morning. Good night, everyone. And seriously, watch out for those black sweaters.